Hi and welcome to this week's GMBN Tech Show. Coming up this week, we have a look at the new Canyon Torque, which comes in a mullet version as well for those of you liking mixed wheels. We also have a look at the Williams Racing Products Centre Hub system. So that's a really interesting concept. There's some great rewind entries and more tech testing in the quiz. Now, jumping into the show this week, I just want to talk about something that we've kind of been batting backwards and forwards in the office, and that is talking about the shock position on bikes. Is it any better to have vertical or horizontal, or does it look any better? So kind of not getting too superficial about things here. I've got bikes with both orientations and I'm genuinely not fussed as long as the bike rides well. Let's just think about this first. Now, the paramount thing that any suspension designer will be looking at is the pivot placement. Everything else is going to be secondary in design. You know, that will be for someone else to configure the frame layouts around that. So the suspension performance is always going to come first with what their design brief is in the first place. Then you also get some people say the weight distribution will come into this. Now, this might be true on bikes like downhill bikes, so you wouldn't want to have a big heavy coil shock really high up on the bike. But at the same time, your body weight on the fulcrum of the bike does way more than any sort of additional weight on the bike will. The only time you're going to notice big weight distribution issues on a bike would be if you were to have an e-bike battery high up on the bike. I reckon that is probably the only thing, unless of course you've got an especially light frame and an especially heavy shock. It's mounted up high, but I reckon just draw a line on the sand under that one. Now let's just have a look at some of the sort of features that you're going to expect to see with vertical shocks and with horizontal shocks and why that might be. So first up, let's talk about how convenient it is to actually reach the lockout switches on there. Now, you might be a rider that doesn't even care about this or doesn't even use those switches, but I use those things all of the time. Regardless of the bike I'm riding or the suspension style, it's because I'm riding with heavy bags sometimes I'm not. It depends on where I'm going. Sometimes I ride my bikes to work. I don't want the bike moving around under me, I'll just flick it onto the lockout switch. Now with a bike with a vertical shock, this can be really hard to reach because of the fact the shock tends to be down by the bottom bracket there. Yes, it's a cool position for the shock, nothing wrong with that, but just it's a little bit of a pain if you're the sort of rider that likes to flick that switch quite often. Whereas if it's under the top tube or it's a horizontal shock that's roughly in the front sort of centre triangle of your bike, tends to be super easy just to reach down and flip that switch. So just something to take into account with the way that you ride. Now, water bottle position is something as well that differs between the two designs. Now, with a vertical shock, yep, you can have room for a water bottle on the front of the frame there, and it'll be easy to reach if that's the case. Whereas with the horizontal method, it's a little bit different. Now, I'll give you an example of two different style frames that I both have. My Nuclear Reactor and the Canyon Lux both have a high mounted position with that horizontal shock, which means there's loads of room. In fact, on the Lux, you can fit 2 water bottles in there, no problem, super easy to reach both of them. Whereas on the Canyon Spectral, it's much lower down. This is because of the way that they wanted the suspension to perform and the fact that the designers wanted the frame to have a very low slung approach with a low standover. Really suits the bike, but it does mean there's a very small amount of room for a water bottle. Now you'll see this on a lot of bikes that have this configuration. It doesn't matter, and some people might sort of bitch a bit about saying, oh, you could barely get a bottle in there. It's good that you can fit a water bottle in there because some people like that. But let's face it, the bike is designed around performance, not around if it has to fit a water bottle in there, because there's other ways of carrying water if need be. I think it's acceptable. I can use a small size water bottle on there, which is great. And if I'm going out for a bigger ride in the summer, I'll take a hydration pack. It's not a deal breaker from my perspective, but I'm sure it will be to some other riders out there. Now, you could say there's differences in the strength of bikes, or at least this is what I'm reading online. And I think this is probably more the case with either bike wreckers out there or bikes of a certain age that are just not quite as good as what we're lucky enough to ride now. Now, 2 places in particular that you can see weaknesses on both different designs would be on a vertical mounted shock design, you'll see there typically be a rocker on the seat tube there, which will compress that shock. Now, underneath that, depending on how that frame is designed or whatever the brand it is, there has been known to see cracks there on that joint. You think where the pivot point is, it's a lot of stress that's going into that part of the frame. But at the same time, this can also be over-engineered and be a really strong, stiff bracing point of the bike. So what could have been a bad point on some older bikes is going to be an excellent point on more modern bikes. So there's no negative here, just pointing out something that has been known. But the same could be said with the horizontal shock mount. Less so with the cross-country style ones like you see with the top tube of my Canyon Lux there, but more so with the design like you see on the Spectral and older designs like the Nukeproof Mega, things like that. Now, we've seen bikes, and to be fair, poorer quality bikes made from, not necessarily poor quality materials, but different materials, and they'll have welds and stuff, so you can get stresses at those junctions. And we've seen down tubes fold before, down tubes crack on certain bike brands over the years. But we're talking quite a long time ago, really, since we've seen this sort of stuff. Modern frame design, I don't think it's really much of an issue. So I certainly wouldn't be worrying about this sort of thing if I was going to buy a bike now. I wouldn't be looking at the visual. Well, actually, maybe you would look at the visuals, but I'd be looking at how the bike rides. That's the number one important thing. One last thing to really observe is the horizontal position, in particular, like that Canyon Lux I keep referring to. It's very commonly used, this style of frame, in the cross-country race world for good reason. It's very easy to build a super lightweight frame. Yes, of course you can get lightweight bikes like the Trek Top Fuel that use a rocker design on there, but it tends to be the lightest possible frames do tend to have the shock just under the top tube there. The hardware, the swing link, if at all, the Trek Pro Caliber doesn't even have a swing link, has that crazy shockless integrated into the frame. But note there's all a form there, and it does allow the designers the freedom of building a very lightweight frame, but not always the case. Now, does the position of a shock really matter to you? What do you ride and what do you prefer? Let us know in the comments underneath. Okay, straight into news, and first thing is a subscription service from Muc-Off. So on screen now you should see some flashy images of what they call the Ridebox subscription service. Now, at first, a few of you probably think, well, why on earth do you want to do that? But think about the world we live in now. We live in a subscription-based world with so many conveniences. Now, I'm sure more than a few of you will have things like Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. You just subscribe to these things, Spotify for music perhaps, or Apple Music. Why not have this with some other things like bike cleaning aids? I think this is a great concept if you either go through that stuff, you can't be bothered to go and get the stuff, or perhaps if you live somewhere where it's not easy to get hold of this stuff on a regular basis. Now, they do tailor-made subscriptions, so you kind of have to sign up for this yourself to figure out what you're going to need and what it costs you. But they say the kits start at $39.99. The sub can be skipped at any time, which is a great thing. You can also pause your sub as well. So if you needed to, I don't know, for example, if you're going traveling for a while, you could just press pause on your subscription. And the process starts with Muc-Off understanding who you are as a rider, the sort of bike you ride, how often you service it, the degree of how you can service it, because you're obviously not going to need certain lubricants and things if you're not doing full servicing. So they can build a profile of what you're going to need and how often you might be likely to need that. It's not like a monthly sub like you'll see with things like Spotify and stuff, but still a subscription-based service. I think it's a smart idea. Next up is another new bike from Canyon. This time it's the Torque, and well, look at this thing. It's basically like a bigger bruiser version of the Spectral. Man, it looks like it means business as well. So there is loads of new stuff going on. It's a brand new platform from Canyon. You could use this for bike park, you could use this for enduro or super enduro or whatever you want to call it, or just smashing your bike down the countryside. That's what it's designed for. Now, it can run a coil shock, it can run an air shock, it's got 170mm travel, it's available in 27.5-inch wheel size, 29-inch wheel size, and 2 models in a mullet wheel size. So on screen, there's going to be loads of pictures, including some of the crazy, the base model. Check the paint job on this, actually, it's insane. There's also a Fabia Vibna edition with Olin suspension on there and Continental tyres. That does look very cool, but really cool packages here available for you. So pricing varies. I've only got UK pricing at the time being. 6 models from $2,649 up to $5,649, which, looking at the spec on it, is actually really, really good value. Now let's go back to the beginning again. So as I said, it's coil shock compatible as well as air shock. It's also twin crown fork compatible. Now, eagle-eyed amongst you might have spotted Thomas Shannon riding one of these actually at the Red Bull Rampage. Just rode it in plain sight. I guess it's the best way to hide a new bike, isn't it? Now, again, more shots of it on screen. It'll fit a bottle in there. It's got the horizontal configuration. So this kind of proves the point we were talking about earlier. It's definitely going to be no weaker. They've got coil shock on this, is rampage proof, so it's absolutely fine. It's just this is the design iteration that they've got to deliver the bike attributes that they wanted to get from it. So I think it looks really cool. 4-bar suspension system on there, so very active rear end. Interestingly, the way they've designed this is it's got up to sag point, it's got quite a lot of anti-squat, and then it tails right off. Now, some traits of anti-squat, if you have no anti-squat on any bike, basically what happens is as you pedal, you compress the suspension. So the more travel a bike has, i.e. this has got 170mm travel, you're going to end up compressing that suspension and sort of robbing your energy as well as making the bike feel like a big sponge. So by adding the anti-squat, basically you effectively almost want to do the opposite. It makes the bike want to stand up and go. So it's going to feel really responsive when you pedal the thing. But one downside with anti-squat, of course, is if you have too much of it, your suspension feels harsh, you get pedal kickback and stuff. So smart design, having just enough that you need it at the sag point there for pedaling hard, and it tails off so the bike's will be nice and plush. Interesting stuff there. So there's alloy and carbon models. The alloy is actually 200 grams lighter than the previous model, and both the alloy and carbon have double sealed bearings everywhere. They've really designed this bike to be ridden by a sort of rider that just wants to abuse the hillside with just hitting stuff as hard as possible and not really spending that much time looking after the bike. Now there's 4 sizes available, small through to extra large. The small and the medium accept a 150mm dropper, the large accepts a 170, and the extra large accepts a 200mm. And geometry on the bikes, there is a flip chip for adjusting the geometry built into the frame there. So head angle 63 to 64 degrees adjustability. Seat angle hovers around 77. It does vary very slightly between the bikes, but it's good and steep to keep you in a good climbing position. Chainstay with the 27.5 or the mullet back end on bikes is 435, and with the 29-inch it's 440mm. Reach varies from 440 up to 515, so fairly similar to the rest of the Canyon range now. As I said, there's 6 models there. Wild colourways. This is that base model again. Look at that thing. It looks insane, almost like a custom paint job. But there's some really nice, classy, sort of slightly more toned down colours in there as well. It's going to be a really popular bike, I think. I think Canyon have nailed that. Now, recently we've seen quite a lot of cool stuff from Williams Racing Products. This is their Instagram handle on screen. It's going to be under there as well. Give them a follow. They're making some really cool products, including this, which I actually mistook for an O-chain when I first saw it. But it does offer what the O-chain does, but also does something else. So more shots of it on screen. So it offers 2 major things. Drivetrain disconnect, effectively. So that means it's not going to be affected by pedal kickback. So your suspension, in theory, should be working better. But also, it means your drivetrain constantly revolves. So they call it center hub because you're basically doing away with the sort of the free hub features on the rear end. Now, to use this, you have to have a fixed rear wheel, and they have shots on their website of bikes literally with cable ties around a cassette and a rear wheel to stop it freewheeling there. Now, their system apparently is almost friction-free. It uses a Sprag clutch on the inside there, so the chain will keep moving the whole time. So you have constant chain tension, so your chain is far less likely to come off. If you suffer from chain dropping, you know, that will appeal to you for sure. It also means you're able to change gear without pedaling because the drivetrain is always moving. So you get some features of a gearbox style system. Now they have a black oxide one-way bearing on the inside there. And they say the Sprag clutch offers instant engagement and 0 rolling resistance. I'd love to try what that feels like, to be honest, because it's always hard to say how much rolling resistance you have with the internal mechanisms of rear hub. Now, we're not just talking about the axle rotating inside the bearings there, we're talking about the free hub system. Of course, you get 2 major types. You get the rotating rings that sort of click together, if you like. You get different variations of those, and they have springs on them to push them into each other, and then you get the pulls that go up and down. And of course, all of that is sealed as well, so there is additional friction on the inside. So by having a Sprag clutch at the front end, interesting stuff. So the retail price is $1,199 in Australian dollars. I'm not up to spec on how much that is in UK equivalent or anywhere else, but it looks like a really interesting piece of kit. Interesting stuff. What do you think of that? Right, steerer tube replacement. Now, this is something we've been asked about quite a lot on tech, and I know that there are companies that can do this, but it's only now I'm going to share one of them that can do this. The Sterling Bike Doctor, great name, by the way, located in Stirling in Scotland, and they offer a service for replacing your steerer tube. So if you've I don't know, if you've bent one or if you've cut one too short, or perhaps if you're moving a fork onto a new bike and it's not the right length, you can get these guys to sort that out for you. And now I'm sure there are other places that will do this online. If anyone knows of any, please share them underneath, especially if they're like in Europe or America or anywhere that's not the UK. Beneficial for people who've been asking that question. It's always good to share that knowledge. But big ups to Sterling Bike Doctor. Instagram handle is right there. Give them a follow. Okay, quiz time. So 3 mountain bike tech related questions coming at you. Use your noggin to try and answer these. First question coming at you on screen right now. A Camelback, like this retro one here, is the original hydration pack. It was the first dedicated hydration pack for riding a bike available in the market. Where did the concept come from? Next question. Williams Racing Products, we refer to those in news, have just made that thing called the Centre Hub. Very cool. Now, someone else also makes a product that mounts onto your crank as a spider and decouples your suspension. What is the name of that product? And the last one, anti-squat is something often referred to in mountain bike suspension. Now, this is kind of a two answers for this one I want. Why is too little not a good thing, and why is too much not a good thing? Okay, let's pick up some comments from last week's show. First one was from Lisa Rogers. This is really cool, actually. Who says, I actually use the muck-off service bag for my blood monitor. Being diabetic, I always carry my blood monitor. As it's water resistant, I can keep it dry just in case it's raining or whatever. Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. And a good shout, actually. Could have been good, actually, just to stuff some first aid things in there as well. So a perfect size pouch for that. So, yeah, good tip there, Lisa. Mitch Bisness says, sorry, Doddy, but I can't help but disagree with the riding bag quiz question. You mentioned the answer being a mini pump, and I agree with you. But one thing I think is more important is an inner tube. If you're running tubeless and have a major puncture, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, all right, fair enough. I do actually normally carry an inner tube. Maybe I just didn't take it out the bag for shot. But what use would an inner tube be if you can pump it up anyway? Next one from Alan Bushin. Is it bike to bean or bean to berm? Yeah, I'll probably just was jibber-jabbering, had too much coffee myself. It was bean to berm was the correct name, which was on screen actually, and you could see it on the bag. It was just me that messed that one up, so sorry about that. Next one from Joe Breakwell. Superflow channel, you mean the Gooch Groove? Okay, time for top mods now, and this is all about cool stuff that you've done to your bikes to make them better. Could be a paint job, could be anything. Could be turning your bike into a gravel bike like we're about to look at. If you've got anything cool that you've done, please do take some photos of it or a video. Let us know about it yourself. There's a link here. There's one down there that you can click on and send it in to the show. So first one this week, this is awesome. So this is a gravel bike, I guess you'd say. So it's from Justice in Bavaria in Germany. It's a Cannondale F700 from 2001. So it is a mountain bike, but repurposed. So this is quite cool. Since my all-mountain is too slow for the forest paths and my trekking bike's not capable enough for the trails on my hometown, I decided I needed a gravel bike. Due to lockdown and parts availability issues, I spent too much time on eBay sourcing most of the parts secondhand to keep costs and emissions down. I bought a Cannondale F700 in rather poor shape, but with a solid frame and good paintwork. It's 2001 26-inch model with a headshock fatty 60mm fork on there. I stripped it and rebuilt the fork. Yeah, I love the fact you say, turned out to be a nightmare. They are famously tricky to work on. If anyone out there has a Cannondale fork and they need it worked on, there are a few suspension tuners that will work on them, but many people turn them away because they take so long and it can be so fiddly, the labour charges can work out quite high for you. Fair play if you're willing to do it yourself. So one of the things that makes them really tricky to work on, and the same with the lefty fork and other things, is they have basically needle bearings on these little plates that go on the inside of the fork there. It's essentially how it retains its stiffness because it's square in profile. The more modern one, in fact you can see it on these, the more modern one has got a three-sided system, and you can see here you have the bearings that roll up and down on the inside. That's essentially how to stop it twisting. Very cool system, but a massive ball ache to service, so fair play to you for having a go. I fitted my old 28-inch wheel set from a touring bike and laced up an XT hub. This is great. There's so much detail in here, just sharing some of these pictures. It looks great. It looks like it's supposed to be like that, to be fair. And it's always a good idea as well, running sort of 700Cs, 28s, whatever wheel sizes on there on regular mountain bike stuff. I've got away with that with my old 26-inch mountain bike that I've put 650Bs on. I could almost get away with 700Cs with slicks on there as well, so I might go a little stage further on my own bike, but I do like having the big mud guards on there just for riding to work when it's raining. Looks great, and cool to see the lefty fork, sorry, head shock fork even. The frame still looks good, doesn't it? It's nice. Note the welds on the frame. Canada were famous, and some people will be like, man, that's because they weren't good welds, but they were famous for having really clean, smooth welds. They would have been really great welds anyway, and then they would just smooth them all over because they wanted just a seamless look to the bike, pre-carbon era. But beautiful looking frame that. Yeah, really nice. So that's what it did look like. You've definitely improved it some way, I think. Yeah, good work. And next one is from Scott in Jindabyne, Australia. I hope I said that right. No good reason for this project other than I enjoyed the challenge. Made his own stem. That's awesome. Looks great. The bike came with a perfectly good one. I love this. So Gravity Customs. I'm guessing you meant to say Proto 1 on there and you've put Pro Row. Unless this Pro Row is something I don't know about, but it doesn't matter. That's awesome. Actually looks really cool. I quite like how angular it is. Yeah, it's good looking. It kind of looks a bit of a hybrid of like an old BMX style stem and a mountain bike stem. That's good work. And there's the block of alloy that you made it from. Fair play. And you've got a brand new Specialized bike as well. Hey, it looks awesome, Scott. That's a great bit of work. That's a step above the top mod, that is, when you go into manufacturing. I think that's awesome. Anyone else made anything? And I don't mean modifying, I think making stuff like Scott has. I think this is really cool. Let's see if there's anyone out there that's manufactured anything better themselves at home. Get involved and we'll see you next time. Cheers. Okay, time for some quiz answers. So the first one, referring to the camelback concept and where the idea came from. Well, as far as I know, the guy, I have to check his name, Michael Edison, he was actually a medic and he was entering, I don't know if it's 100 miles or 100 kilometre race. Either way, he was entering a pretty serious race in Texas in ridiculous heat. Well, I'd say ridiculous heat. It would be if I was doing it. I'd probably like nearly cark it in the heat. But the point is, he didn't want to be dehydrated, and also in the intensity of a race, he was worried about reaching down for water, but he actually thought it was quite dangerous. So, being a medic, he got an IV bag, basically a drip to you and me, pinned the hose, as it were, onto his jersey, and put it basically in a sock in his back pocket. And after that race, I was like, this is amazing. I could actually just go along, drink, spit the hose out when I didn't want any more, had more fluid with than he needed. So he went straight to a designer and they got to work in producing the first camelback. And although this one is a replica, that's roughly what they looked like when they came out. The hose wasn't quite as good as this one. It's got a newer hose in there, but it was a simple neoprene bag that went in your back. And man, what an evolution that's been, because that was the first hydration pack available for mountain bikes. And look where we are now. You know, there's loads of great options out there. A funny story with these, I remember getting one of these when I was a kid and I did my first bike race with a hydration pack and the whole message was hydrate or die. But bearing in mind that was based in America in hot conditions. We're in the UK. You know, you can just open your mouth and you can have a drink most of the time you're out riding. So I was used to maybe drinking half a bottle in a race and I went to having like 2 litres of water, drank the whole lot and I had to stop and have the world's longest wee in a race, probably costing me the win. Who am I kidding? Next up was Williams Racing Products has developed the centre hub system, but who else offers something crank mounted that can decouple your suspension? Yeah, O-Chain. I had one for a while on my Nuke Proof and I've bounced it around on some other stuff. I actually want to try out my old Intense bikes. That had quite a lot of chain pull and some odd characteristics because of the old VPP system on there. But very cool, very popular. And actually, you might have seen Martin Ashton talking about it recently. You might have seen it on the EMBN show. Valentina Rossi has released a bike. Whatever you think of e-bikes, check the bike out. It looks unreal. And that's coming with an O-Chain as standard. Very cool tech, that. And finally, anti-squat is something often referred to in mountain bike suspension. Give me a reason why too much and too little can be a bad thing. Okay, so too little would mean when you're pedaling, the bike's bobbing up and down. Now, if you've got a short travel bike, like a cross-country bike, it won't be much of a problem. But if you've got an 8-inch travel bike, the bike's going to pedal like a pig. So in which case you'd want quite a lot of anti-squat to resist it squatting as you pedal. The downside is anti-squat effectively gives you pedal kickback because you're putting tension on the chain there to stop the suspension moving. So what would happen if you had loads of anti-squat the whole time is every time you hit a massive bump, you get a little bit of pedal kickback, which is why designers try and have a bit of anti-squat to support the pedaling and have it tail off. And this will be different on all sorts of bike designs. But there you go, that's just 2 reasons. How'd you get on there? Interested to know. Let us know in the comments underneath, and we'll see you on next week's show. Ta-ra.